Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Total Podcast with me, your host, Phil Scott. On this episode of the Total Podcast, I have a very special guest. She's gone through something very interesting, and I think it's a lesson that most listeners will find fascinating and interesting, and I'll let Giselle tell her story. So let's take it from there. So, my guest is Giselle Cortés. So, Giselle, thank you very much for coming on the show today. I truly appreciate it.
Hi, good morning, Phil. Thank you so much for inviting me on your show.
You're welcome. So, first of all, Giselle, before we get into why you're here, tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, where you went to school, that kind of thing.
Sure. So I grew up in San Diego, California. I currently still live here. I have two sisters. I went to college here. I went to San Diego State, where I received my bachelor's degree, and then I went on to pursue a master's in public health.
And what did you receive your bachelor's degree in?
I received my bachelor's in urban studies, and while it's not immediately correlated with public health, I worked for city government for a few years after I graduated, and I began to become involved in a series of health promotion programs for the city, and I realized that that's where my true passion rested, so I went on to continue with school.
Well, we are fellow SDSU alums, so congratulations for that.
Awesome.
And so now, Giselle, if you would, tell me about Cushing syndrome, and how you found out. So just tell us your background in terms of what you were going through physically and the symptoms and your journey throughout the whole process of figuring out how to change your symptoms and to get to where you are now.
Okay. So Cushing syndrome is actually also can be a disease, but I had the syndrome, which Cushing's is a condition of the adrenal glands, the endocrine system. And so we each have two adrenal glands. They are above our kidneys. And Cushing syndrome is the overproduction of the hormone cortisol. And so when your body produces an excess amount, several things start going wrong. Particularly, what I experienced, one of my first symptoms was elevated blood pressure. So I had extremely high blood pressure at the age of 31.
Wow.
I was always thin, active, played soccer, racquetball, basketball, ran half marathons, you name it, I did it. And it just didn't really make sense to me because there is also no family history of hypertension.
Hmm.
And so that was my first symptom. I was pregnant when I was 30, had a baby at 31, and after that was when the hypertension began. I was initially told that it was due to preeclampsia, which is high blood pressure in pregnancy. But when the hypertension persisted for years and years, up until last year, as a matter of fact, um, I knew that it was no longer, it wasn't related to pregnancy. In the following years, I experienced other symptoms such as um, a lot of weight gain, but not in the traditional places. I had a very round face. It was in my shoulders and my stomach area. And a traditional sign and symptom of Cushing's is what they call a moon face. Your face becomes so round, it's compared to a moon.
Wow.
Um, the shoulders they refer to as the buffalo hump because it's so much weight here in your shoulders and your neck. And like I said, a lot of roundness in the stomach area. I also experienced another symptom, which is menstrual irregularities. I had a miscarriage. I have two daughters, but I had a miscarriage in between them, and I could not become pregnant for the longest time. I also, in pregnancy, my third pregnancy, experienced another symptom is um, elevated sugar levels, diabetes, diabetic. I was gestationally diabetic. I also, in my third pregnancy, experienced other symptoms such as anxiety, and throughout this whole 7 year process, experienced a lot of depression. I didn't want to admit it to myself, to other people, but it was real. I was depressed, and I sought the help that I needed at the time because I was experiencing all these symptoms. The illness was progressing one by one, but all these things just, didn't really ever seem right to me.
You had everything, including the kitchen sink, thrown at you in
Oh,
terms of
yes.
symptoms. My goodness. So, what process did you go through to figure out that you had Cushing syndrome? Because it had to take a lot of research for you to get to that point, I would think.
So initially, as I mentioned, I have a degree in public health, and I was doing research on my own, trying to figure out, is this hypertension medication that I'm on, is it healthy to be on the rest of my life? Is it okay to be on? That was where my research first began because that was my first symptom. And at the time, I brought it up with my doctors that I had, and they said, no, it's okay. You should be all right. Even though what I had read, I was on nifedipine at the time. I read that it was hard on your kidneys and that it really isn't something you want to be on for a long term. But I was young, as I mentioned, I was 31. I think I was trusting. I thought that the doctors knew better than me. I'm not a doctor, but I trusted them for, I believe, far too long. Ultimately, what helped me arrive at my diagnosis was 7 years later, going to a new doctor and a new healthcare system, fresh eyes, a fresh perspective. And when I went to this new doctor, I was explaining to him, I don't eat this, I exercise every day, I'm gaining incredible amounts of weight. I don't understand if I need a nutritionist or if I'm doing something wrong. And he stopped me in my tracks and said, I believe you. This doesn't seem right. You're young. The where the weight in your body, the proportions they're not right. They're in your face, as I mentioned, in your shoulders and your stomach. Women your age, they gain weight in their breasts, in their thighs, in their hips. Not in their face, not in their stomach. And so this is all due to Cushing syndrome. And I said, wow, he found an answer. He's going to help me. And I didn't know what it was myself. I didn't know. I asked him, well, that's great. Is there a medication you can give me? And he said, no, not through medication. You will most likely require surgery. At
Oh,
that point, I froze. I was very nervous. I was very scared. I mentioned I have two young daughters, and it was not what I was expecting.
so how did your husband and having your husband and your daughter's support in your family, how important was that for you to get through this ordeal?
Oh, it was crucial. And my husband, for years he had heard me complain and say, I don't feel good. I don't feel like when we got married. I don't know why I look like this. I would see pictures around the house of my old self and say, I don't look like that anymore. I don't recognize myself in the mirror. I look like I'm pregnant, but I'm not. And he said, you're doing all the right things. You're exercising, you're eating well. We're just missing a puzzle piece. We don't know what it is. And he was so right. There was a missing puzzle piece, and that was the fact that I indeed had Cushing syndrome, which meant that I had a tumor that needed to be removed. It was on my left adrenal gland, and it was rather large.
So how long did it take for the surgery? How long was the surgery? And how long was the recovery period for you?
The surgery was about an hour and 45 minutes. My new endocrinologist explained the adrenal glands are somewhat of a mushy consistency. So, because the tumor was located above it, they could not pluck it off. They had to take the whole gland And he explained it's okay, we can survive with one as humans. However, because we are removing a gland that was overproducing, your other gland, my right one, it went dormant for 7 years. It knew that the other one was producing way too much, so it just stopped producing completely. Cortisol is a hormone that we do require to live. It helps us wake up, it helps us do our daily things, work, play, all the things we need to do. However, when they removed my adrenal gland, my body went to zero. I was now on the other end. I was producing zero cortisol. So that meant that I needed to take, and I actually am still taking a steroid called hydrocortisone to make up for the cortisol that my body is not producing at this time. Thankfully, I've had a couple of tests, blood tests. I was at zero production. I'm sorry, I'll go back. My surgery was in September of 2024.
Mhm.
In October, landed back in the ER and was readmitted, and they tested me at zero. In March of this year, 2025, I had the same ACTH blood test again. I was at 3.5 uh, milligrams, I believe is the measurement. However, the typical body, the typical person to survive and live is needs to be in the range of 14 to 26. So while I'm not at zero, I'm inching up at 3.5, and I will most likely have another blood test in a couple of months, but it's been quite the whirlwind. I feel miles better than a year ago. Last July was when I was finally diagnosed properly. I was exhausted. I was an insomniac. I couldn't sleep. I was depressed. I was 168 pounds when I used to be 120.
Wow.
So, statistically, I'm a statistics person. That's 40% of my body weight. I was 40% heavier. I was so depressed. So now this year, I feel great. I've lost weight. I can sleep better. I do not need hypertension medication. I feel like the person I was before. I'm healthy again. And I praise those doctors and I praise God for working through them to finally get me my diagnosis 7 years later.
Wow, what a journey. Well, that's incredible. So tell me, what have been the biggest lessons that you've learned from going through this and just going through like from day one when you realized something wasn't right up until now, where you were feeling incredible again?
So, number one is to definitely trust your instincts. There are several people that, like myself, might be young, might be scared, might be all the reasons to not trust your instincts. You think you're not a doctor, you think you're not qualified, but you live in your body. You know yourself best. When something seems off, I urge you to seek a second opinion. Like I mentioned, I wish I would have done it before, but there's no point living in the past. And I came across a study by the Mayo Clinic that said 20% of people who went to seek a second opinion realized that their first diagnosis was incorrect. I initially was diagnosed by my old doctors with simply essential hypertension, which means high blood pressure with no underlying cause. As I shared, I definitely had an underlying cause. It was a tumor. So I also learned to be patient. I wish I would be better by now. I wish I didn't need to take medicine, but as my doctors explained, it took you years to get to that point. It might take you a little bit longer to come off this medication, but you will get better. You must trust the process.
Now, you're an author as well. So why don't you, if you would, just kind of give us a little tease, if you would, as to what you're writing and what you hope to do.
Yes, so I've loved to write. I mentioned work in statistics and do math all day long. However, my dream is writing. And so now I have a story to share with the world. I want people to know that Cushing syndrome is real because I see a lot of advertisements saying, the cortisol belly, you can take these drinks and this and that, but there it might be due to a hormonal imbalance that, you don't need to take those drinks. You can have potentially maybe something removed and then, you'll be a lot better. But I'm bringing awareness to the condition and letting other people know that they're not alone in misdiagnosis and feeling ill. I felt like I was alone for a very long time.
Well, I will tell you, I had not even heard of Cushing's until it was just, I think it was just amazing that your Instagram feed came across my feed. And when I was reading what you said that you were going through, I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this? So
Yeah,
I looked it up myself too. I'm like, wow, this is, I'd not even heard of it. And I wonder how many people across the world are enduring Cushing's.
exactly. Yes, it's rarely diagnosed. My doctor said 6 to 8 people per million every year. But it's not rarely diagnosed because it doesn't exist. It's rarely diagnosed because alone, all the symptoms I described to you, I mean, people have high blood pressure, people experience miscarriages, people are diabetic, but together it tells a completely different story. And so part of the reason why I'm writing this book is to bring awareness to let people know, hey, this could be for a greater reason. All these random things that you think are happening may not be random at all.
Absolutely. And also, what has been, now that you've gone through the surgery and you're feeling better, did you ever have to go at any point through um, any kind of psychological stuff to try to help you get through the depression? Did you have to go through that at all? Or was it just, okay, I'm going to deal with this on my own?
Well, initially I did seek out a therapist, a mental health therapist, around 2019, because in August of 2019 was when I experienced my miscarriage. And after that, I was very sad, very depressed, couldn't get out of bed. And after that, I've continued a relationship with her because of all the things I mentioned and just kind of adapting back to normal life, explaining to her that sometimes I feel awkward a little bit in my body, or people turn around and they look at me like, did she have some sort of tummy tuck? Or like, why does she look so different? And I also, when I was sad, when I was depressed, I retracted socially. I didn't feel well. I wasn't comfortable in my body and the clothes that I was wearing, so I stopped going out with friends. I didn't really explain to them why. I didn't even know what was wrong with me myself yet. So I didn't go to baby showers or birthday parties, and I blamed myself for not participating when I didn't feel well. And then like I mentioned with my daughters when they were younger, they were babies, I would only take pictures of them. I never wanted to be in those photos. I thought I looked weird or deformed and that they were so cute, I would ruin the photo. So, there's still a lot of trauma, I would say, because I look back at those photos and I don't like them. I'm sad that I didn't go to the parties. Like I said, wish I would have come to this conclusion on my own before having this extensive knowledge in public health, but there's a lot of blame that I'm processing. But overall, I am a much happier person. I know that there is no changing the past. I went through what I went through, and there is purpose in suffering. My purpose is now to bring awareness, to be a beacon of hope, to help other people, to follow my dreams, to finally write. And so that's what I'm doing now.
Well, that's awesome. And I think one thing that you should always keep in mind too is it wasn't your fault that you were going through the things that you were going through. I mean, it was this physical condition that you had no idea that you had. So I think you should be able to let yourself off the hook, is what I'm saying, because it wasn't your fault. You had no idea you were going through all of that.
Right.
And I think we have to kind of give ourselves some, you know what? I didn't know I was going through that. I understand it now. So it was not your fault, and there was a reason why you were feeling the way that you were feeling. So I understand that had to be such a horrible experience that you had to go through. But you're coming out better on the other side, and you've learned a lot, and you can help a lot of people by sharing your story with them.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. So Giselle, do you have any timetable in your head as to when you want to get your work published, or is it just a kind of a process, a work in progress? You're gonna just take the time that you need to get to where you need to go.
Well, actually, I believe that the book will be published by August,
Oh,
maybe
yay.
mid-August. I have a publisher. We're in the works. It's being edited and it will be ready by this summer.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah,
congratulations. Well, it
thank
would be fun to have you on again to talk about your book when it's all ready, when you either when after you release it or just before. It'd be nice to have you on to talk about it again. I think so many people would benefit and will benefit from hearing your story, learning from your experiences, and to just be able to relate to you on a human level because I mean I can't imagine having to go through something like that, to have all of these physical symptoms and not understand what it is that's happening to you. I mean, that just what an incredible ordeal you had to go through.
Yeah, it was quite the ride. It was most of my 30s, but as the saying goes, 40s is the new 30s. So I'm feeling great and I'm looking forward to the future and I would love to be on your show again.
Thank you, Giselle. Thank you so much. So it's been an honor and a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. And again, I feel so blessed that that you came across my Instagram feed, or else I wouldn't have even known about Cushing's and just everything that you went through. And my audience, I know, will benefit greatly hearing your story and learning from you. So, Giselle, thank you so very much for coming on the podcast today. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Phil. And I just wanted to share with all the listeners, if they're interested in following me on Instagram, my handle is at Giselle Cortés _author. And as I mentioned, the book will be dropping soon.
Do you have a will you have a website for the book at all or anything like that? Or is that something
Not
you can let
yet.
us know later?
Yeah, I'll let you know later. Not yet, but as I mentioned, that's my handle or, email communication. It's author Giselle Cortés altogether at gmail.com.
All right. Thank you, Giselle. Thank you so
Thank
very
you very much,
much.
Phil.
You're welcome. All right. So
Okay,
this has been a wonderful interview. Thank you so much, Giselle.
thank you.
All right. So with that, everyone, that is the end of this episode of the Total Podcast with me, your host, Phil Scott. Everyone stay safe, be careful out there, take care of one another, and we will talk again soon.